Natasha and Her Illegitimate Child in a Muslim Society. A novel by Dr. A. Ahmed. This story is narrated in 2 books. Book 1. Copyrights. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except by a reviewer who may quote brief passages in a review to be printed in a newspaper, magazine, school journal, or university article. This novel is a work of fiction, but the entire story is based on the actual life of a Muslim family in Sudan. Therefore, all names, characters, places, and incidents are either the product of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, events, or locales is entirely coincidental. Chapter 11. The Embarrassment by the Arab Media Interview. There is no trial in the history of Sudan that received so much media coverage than the Muslim daughter of Shams al-Din family's trial. The case of Natasha became of great concern to the international community. The international media wrote extensively on this sensitive issue and blamed the Islamic Sharia court for trying to condemn an underage girl who got impregnated for the first time at the age of 14 by a man who was double of her age. Many human rights organizations demanded that Natasha should not be tried by the Islamic Sharia court in Khartoum. She has done nothing to deserve such a barbaric and cruel punishment of receiving 200 lashes. She's supposed to be treated as a victim of abuse, exploitation, kidnap, and rape. In the meantime, her Sudanese father Sami Shams al-Din has been interviewed by the BBC International News. In the interview, he mentioned that the police authority forced him to surrender his Sudanese passport and his daughter's Russian passport and placed both under house arrest. His house is guarded by the police authority around the clock. He does not know whether the police are there for their protection or to prevent him and his daughter from fleeing out of the country. Sami Shams al-Din admitted that after the brutal murder of his Russian wife Nadia Alexandrov, he is not intended to spend one more day in Sudan. He is worried about the safety of his daughter. He knows that his father, uncles, and cousins will not rest until they perform honor killing on him and his so-called fallen daughter, who committed adultery out of the marriage bond and became pregnant by an illegitimate child twice. Why his daughter should be forced to stay in a country where so many people want to kill her. They had already killed his Russian wife Nadia Alexandrov because she shielded her daughter Natasha. They had also seriously wounded his daughter. He also told the BBC that his daughter is held in Khartoum because the police want her to be tried and condemned by the Islamic Sharia court on the charges of adultery and illegal pregnancy. He believed that his daughter should be treated by the Khartoum police as a victim rather than a criminal. He then informed the interviewer that for his daughter's safety they were supposed to flee to Moscow a couple of days prior to the honor killing and the brutal murder of his beloved Russian wife, Nadia Alexandrov. According to the medical report, his wife was stabbed 19 times in her body by long and sharp daggers and hit on her head by an axe. No one in Sudan seemed to feel sorry for his late wife. The entire media coverage and the police authority are focusing their attention on his daughter's pregnancy without marriage. Natasha's father ended his words by telling the interviewer that he is very worried about the outcome of the religious trial of his beloved daughter. Moreover, Sami Shams al-Din has also been interviewed by an Egyptian magazine known as Rose al-Youssef. In this interview, the heartbroken husband who is still mourning the brutal murder of his wife has been asked many embarrassing questions. For example, the female interviewer asked him, what was his reaction as a Muslim father when he heard his Muslim girl who did not learn from her first mistake she went again and slept with the same man who illegally impregnated her before and got impregnated by him for the second time with an illegitimate child? Sami Shams al-Din responded to this question by saying that his daughter was underage when a man who was twice of her age deceived her when she was a 14-year-old female child through the pretense of love. The same evil man had deceived her once again and impregnated her. In both cases, the Sudanese police authority and the judge of the Khartoum criminal court must look at them as kidnap and rape of a minor girl by a grown-up married man who has 3 wives. The Egyptian female interviewer asked Sami Shams al-Din a question that he always tried to avoid answering it. She asked him what his response would be if the Sharia court in Khartoum finds his daughter guilty of committing adultery twice and sentences her to 200 lashes. Although Sami Shams al-Din is an atheist and never believed in any religion, he understood that the question is a trap. On one hand, if he openly admits his unbelief in Islam before a Muslim female interviewer and in a magazine mainly read by Muslims, then he will be accused of apostasy and later face the death penalty for apostatizing from Islam. On the other hand, if he consents to such an Islamic law of sentencing a 16-year-old girl to 200 lashes for sleeping with a man who took advantage of her young age and beguiled her in the pretension of love, then he will be giving the green light to the Sharia court to whip his daughter to death. To avoid the two horns of the dilemma, the sad father answered that tricky question by saying, "I don't believe there is any court of law in the whole world that can punish a minor girl who had been deceived and raped twice by a pedophile married man. The person who is supposed to be arrested and punished for twice committing such hideous sex crime is the kidnapper and rapist of my underage daughter Natasha. By the way, what do you know about the man who has impregnated your daughter twice?" "I don't know much about him except that he used to be my neighbor. At that time, he was the husband of one wife. He used to beat his wife almost every day. One day I went to him and requested him to stop abusing his wife. He got angry and quoted for me the hadith of the Prophet which said, narrated Umar ibn al-Khattab, the Prophet said, "A man should not be asked why he beat the members of his household." Sunan Abu Dawud, Book 11, hadith number 2142. He also quoted for me a verse from the Quran which allows the man to beat his rebellious wife. "Righteous women are therefore obedient, and those you fear may be rebellious. Nushuz, admonish them, banish them to their couches, and then beat them." Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 34. What did you say to him when he quoted for you those sacred texts? What could I say to him? Could I tell him the Prophet and the Quran are wrong? No, of course, you could not. Anyway, you said at that time he was the husband of one wife. Do you have any idea how many wives he has now? From the police report and the media, I came to know that he has 3 women now. 2 are Muslim women and 1 a Christian woman. Are they all his wives? That is what I heard. Are you including your daughter among those women? Sami Shams al-Din felt so much insulted when the female interviewer asked that last question. He redirected the question to the Egyptian girl in a way to make her feel the same pain that she has caused in his bleeding heart. Would you call the man who raped your 14-year-old daughter her husband? If he married her according to the Sunnah of Allah and his beloved Prophet Muhammad, then he is her husband, even if she is a 9-year-old girl. You guys are sick people. Every kind of abuse you justify by referring to the example of the Prophet Muhammad and the Holy Quran. According to our Sharia, if a man marries a 9-year-old girl, it is not child abuse or rape. It is marriage, and we have to respect that because our gracious Prophet Muhammad, may the prayers and peace of Allah be upon him, had done it with his beloved wife Aisha when she was a 6-year-old child and slept with her when she became 9-year-old girl. Sami Shams al-Din understood that the Arab girl most probably got some information that he is atheist, and that is why she kept taunting him about that fact. He asked her a question, or rather challenged her in a way to embarrass her as she kept insulting and embarrassing him with unnecessary questions. Since this interview started, you haven't asked me one single question about my late Russian wife who was brutally murdered by those coward cousins of mine in the name of honor killing. Honor killing is part of our Arabic culture. It has nothing to do with Islam. However, there is no father in the Arab countries, or the entire Muslim world would remain quiet when his daughter got impregnated twice before marriage and delivered in front of his eyes 2 awlad haram, or illegitimate children. I myself believe that my father would have butchered me and cut my defiled body into bits and pieces if I slept with a man before I became his Muslim wife according to the blessed Sunnah of Allah and his beloved Prophet. Moreover, my brothers and cousins would have set my body on fire and burned me alive. Family honor is very important in our culture, and that is why the Prophet Muhammad commanded every Muslim family to circumcise their daughters when they're small girls to ensure that when they grow up, they do not bring shame to their parents. In that regard, he said, circumcision is a sunnah for men and a preservation of honor for women, hadith of Abu Malik and Abu Dawud. Such irrational beliefs and barbaric practice of female genital mutilation made the outside world to see us as a backward and primitive society. We are abusing our women by those practices. Why should we care what the outside world thinks about us? Why should we leave our culture and Sharia laws and follow their secular laws, which allow the man and woman to live together and have sex and produce children without marriage? Why should we follow man-made laws that allow the man and man to get married and live as husband and wife and practice disgusting sodomy, and women practice the same as lesbians? Those secular laws you are talking about are not based on any religious authority. They are man-made laws and meant to serve the interests of society. At any time, if they cease to serve the interests of society, they can be changed or modified to suit the new demands of the same society. They are not fixed and rigid like our Sharia laws, which WER created for the 7th century society of the Sahara Desert of Arabia, by the way. Can I ask whether you are a Muslim man and believe in the Holy Quran and our infallible Prophet Muhammad, may the prayers and peace of Allah be upon him? By answering this question, am I going to resurrect my late beloved wife back to life or stop my dear daughter from being tried by the Sharia court? No. Do you have any further unnecessary or embarrassing questions to ask me? No, I don't have. Chapter 12. The child abuser flees abroad. As soon as Yasser Sef al-Dawla and his Christian wife, Maria Malwal, arrived in Cairo, they applied for refugee status. In his application, Yasser mentioned that his life in Sudan is in great danger. Some people made 2 attempts to murder him for an honor killing. Yasser has been truthful in his application and mentioned that because he slept with his neighbor's daughter without marrying her and made her pregnant, her family members tried twice to slay him on honor killing. He supported his application by the 2 medical reports that were issued to him by the 2 hospitals that treated him and the complaint copies of the police cases that he made in both cases. To save his life, he fled from Sudan and came to Egypt to seek protection and refugee status. Due to the strong case that has been supported by tangible proofs, his application was approved by the United Nations office in Cairo and instantly granted refugee status. His 3rd wife, Maria Malwal, also applied for refugee status based on being a persecuted Christian girl from the Denka tribe of the south of Sudan. She claimed her Christian family was displaced due to the civil war between the Nuer tribe and the Denka tribe and settled in Khartoum. Then Maria claimed that she had been persecuted in Khartoum City because of her African ethnicity and the Christian religion. Although she has graduated from a good seminary college, she could not be able to get employment anywhere in Khartoum City where she was born and raised up. Besides that, she was treated like a black slave girl, and her circumstances forced her to work as a maidservant in Sudanese Arabs' houses. Everywhere she worked, she had been sexually harassed, and many times she was abused and raped by the Muslim male members of her Arab employers. After many years of abuse and suffering and looking for a decent job, she got employment in a private school. Unfortunately, after 2 years of employment, the Sudanese Minister of Education shut down that school because it was a Christian school with a co-education system. The Christian school was shut down because a Muslim female student became pregnant without marriage by either her male classmate or her male teacher. Also, in her application for refugee status in Egypt, Maria referred to the cases of her Christian brothers and sisters who already obtained refugee status in Egypt, and at present, they are living a wonderful life in the West. Her false claim has also been verified, and she also is granted refugee status along with her Muslim husband Yasser. As soon as Yasser and Maria got refugee asylum in Cairo, they approached some Western embassies and applied for resettlement. However, due to the high volume of the applications, they have been told that they may need to wait for a couple of years or more before their turn can come. Meanwhile, the married couple Yasser and Maria are receiving very little financial assistance from the UN office, which hardly meeting their basic needs. To get more income, Maria is compelled to seek employment in Egypt. Usually, for a Sudanese man to get work in Egypt is something second to impossible. Egypt has the highest unemployment rate in the Arab world. Sudanese girls can get employment in Egyptian houses as maidservants. Such kind of work involved high risk in the Middle East and North Africa. Most of the maidservants who are working in the Arab countries always fall victims to sexual harassment and rape by the male members of the families that employed them. Every Arab employer considers those foreign maidservants as his right-hand possession or his paid female slaves, and as such he can sleep with them against their wishes. Despite this serious problem, Maria found work in one Egyptian house as a maidservant. As soon as she began to work in that house, she is continuously sexually harassed every day by the man who employed her. Still, the Christian wife Maria tolerated that kind of abuse and did neither quit her work nor inform her Muslim husband Yasser. She is scared that her Muslim husband may consider her cheating on him with another man and hence slay her in honor killing. Her silence has been interpreted as consent, and therefore her employer began to rape her. When she protested, her rapist threatened to kick her out. Once again, Maria agreed to be abused and raped for the sake of keeping her job. In that way, she has been treated as a kind of a secret-kept wife, which called in Arabic language Kalila, or a female slave by her Egyptian male employer. Even so, the African wife continued to hide her abuse and rape from her Arab husband. In the meantime, Yasser is sitting idly at home and living on his wife's income and the small pittance they are receiving from the UN office. The fugitive rapist of the underage girl Natasha did not live more than a couple of months in Egypt before he came to know through the Sudanese newspapers about the case of the girl. He made pregnant twice outside the marriage bond and the murder of her Russian mother in the name of honor killing. He also learned that the Khartoum police are searching for him and a countrywide search and arrest warrant has been issued against him. He knows that sooner or later the Khartoum police will find out that he had fled out of Sudan, and at the present, he is hiding in Egypt. Therefore, the escapee Yasser understood that if he is caught by the Egyptian police and extradited to Sudan, he will be tried by the Sharia court and get stoned to death for illegally impregnating a girl while he was married to other 3 women. Perceiving the imminent danger that waiting for him in Sudan, Yasser shared his problem with his Christian wife and convinced her that the only escape for him is to be out of Egypt as soon as possible. Maria understood the problem and agreed with her husband that they must leave Egypt as quickly as possible. The question that puzzled them were to flee and how to run. Firstly, they need a lot of money to flee to another country. They have no money to enable them to travel even from one city to another city in Egypt. Secondly, they need visas to move to another country, and that may take a long time to obtain. Thirdly, even if they have succeeded in fleeing to another country, how can they manage to live in that country without money and work? The last obstacle that stands in their way is the fact that Maria is 6 months pregnant. Many airlines may not allow a woman of such a high pregnancy to board their planes. With all those obstacles standing in their way, the couple almost gave up hope. One day, Maria shared her husband's problem with one of her Sudanese female relatives who likewise is waiting for her turn to immigrate to the West. The relative told her that she should approach the UN office in Cairo and inform them that her husband's life in Egypt is in imminent danger. At first, Maria rejected that advice because she thought that the UN office may consider her husband a criminal running away from the law and inform the Egyptian police about him. Somehow, her relative convinced her that what her husband did in Sudan will not be considered a crime by the UN office. The United Nations office is governed by Western secular laws rather than Islamic Sharia laws. Having sex before marriage and impregnating a woman out of wedlock is not a crime in the West. According to Maria's relative, Yasser's illicit sexual relationship with his girlfriend is not going to be considered a criminal in nature by the UN office. The employees of the UN office may look at his sexual acts as abhorrent immoral behavior and marital unfaithfulness, but they cannot condemn him for making his girlfriend pregnant without marrying her. They can condemn him only if there is a police report stating that he made a girl pregnant through rape. All Sudanese newspapers mentioned that Yasser Saif al-Dawla had committed adultery with his girlfriend Natasha Shams al-Din. They also stated that Natasha and her mother were attacked by their relatives who wanted to perform on them the obligation of honor killing. The mother was slain, but her daughter was rescued by the neighbors. The same relatives had made 2 attempts to murder the lover Yasser, who made one of their daughters pregnant without marriage, but both attempts failed. Maria Malwal believed the words of her female relative and decided to approach the UN office and disclose the death threat that her husband is facing. She decided not to share her plan of approaching the UN office and seeking its help with her husband for the fear that he may prevent her from doing so. Through the short time she stayed with him, Maria came to know that her husband Yasser is a very coward man. Therefore, she asked her female relative to accompany her to the UN office. Then the Christian wife carefully selected an article from a Sudanese newspaper that mentioned the sex crime of her Muslim husband and took it with her as proof. The article mentioned her husband by name and included his photo. The newspaper also mentioned her as one of his 3 wives. It also stated that Yasser Saif al-Dawla had impregnated a young girl without marrying her. Before impregnating her, Yasser wanted to marry his girlfriend Natasha, but her father rejected his betrothal. Due to that unlawful pregnancy, Yasser is wanted by the Khartoum police. The article stated further that if Yasser is caught, he will be condemned by the Islamic Sharia court and get sentenced to be stoned to death for committing adultery with a girl while he is already a married person. As soon as the legal representatives of the UN office heard the case of the refugee Yasser Saif al-Dawla, they marked the file of Maria and her husband as a top priority and forwarded it on the same day to 3 Western embassies, America, Canada, and Australia. All those embassies considered the case of the 2 Sudanese refugees, Yasser Saif al-Dawla and Maria Malwal, as urgent and invited the couple for an interview on the following day. Maria and Yasser ignored 2 of those invitations and attended one interview at the Canadian embassy. During the interview, the liar Yasser falsely claimed he had divorced his other 2 wives, Badriya and Duriya, and at present, he has only one wife, Maria. A couple of days later, the couple is informed that their application for resettlement in Canada has been approved. Then they were asked to go for a medical examination. When it appeared that the medical results cannot be available for 2 weeks, the Canadian embassy waived off that condition and asked the couple to approach the Red Cross and obtain their emergency travel documents. Those travel documents have been made available on the same day and sent to the Canadian embassy by special emissary. Furthermore, due to the urgency of the case, the Canadian embassy waived the police clearance requirements from the couple. As soon as the Canadian embassy received that special dispatch, it issued 2 landed immigrant visas and air tickets for the Muslim husband Yasser Saif al-Dawla and his Christian wife Maria Malwal and booked them in the earliest available flight. Accordingly, from the day Maria approached the UN office and sought its help until the day the couple boarded a Canadian airplane and escaped out of Egypt and headed towards Canada, it took only 6 days. Chapter 13. The trial of adultery and pregnancy before marriage. The trial of the illegally twice became pregnant Muslim girl Natasha Sami Shams al-Din is scheduled to take place on a Sunday afternoon in one of the most spacious auditoriums in the capital city of Sudan. Many top officials from the government and VIP people in the city were invited for the trial. The Sharia court announced in advance that admission inside the court auditorium would be based on first comes, first serves, except for those who had been invited. On the trial day, the court doors were open from 10 a.m., and as soon as the court hall was full, the doors closed. Those who came late have been advised by the police to go back to their homes and watch the trial on their TVs or hear it on radios. The courtroom is heavily guarded from within and without. The media people filled the space between the judging platform and the audience. After many hours of waiting, someone announced the arrival of the judge of the Sharia court and his 4 assistants. Shortly, the audience saw 5 Maullanas enter the auditorium and occupy their seats on the platform. All those 5 religious judges are dressed up in Sudanese local galabia and covered their heads with big white turbans. After those religious judges were served with some soft beverages, the court announced the arrival of the suspects. The first suspect that has been brought inside the courtroom is the half Sudanese and half Russian girl, Natasha Sami Shams al-Din, surrounded by 4 female guards. Shortly after that, a group of people marched in one line and entered the court. They are 17 in number. They are Sami Shams al-Din's father, the 4 murderers of his wife, and his other 11 relatives who are all his uncles and cousins. Natasha is 6 months pregnant when she is brought before those 5 religious judges. She is 16 years and 6 months old. She is wrapped by the Islamic abaya and hijab from head to foot. Only her round face could be seen. She looked frightened and confused. Despite that, she still looks extremely beautiful. The mixture of a Russian mother and a Sudanese father gave her a kind of rare beauty that made her look different from anyone present in that court. Her father is standing near her. He also appears worried and tense. His face revealed that he had not slept for so many nights, and his eyes showed that they had shed many tears. Nonetheless, no one in the audience seemed to have pity on him or his daughter. For the audience, he is a shameless, useless, and coward father. For them, if he had an iota of honor in his heart, he would have slaughtered his daughter from the first time she got impregnated without marriage. On the contrary, the audience showed more respect for his father, uncles, and cousins. Those relatives appeared to the audience as brave tigers. One of the audiences shouted when he saw Sammy Shams Aldine walking inside the courtroom following his pregnant daughter, remove from him those man's clothes and put on him a woman's dress. But there is no police officer who has reproached or arrested that wicked man who spoke those nasty words. At 1:30 p.m. the trial began. Someone from the court read the charge sheet against Natasha and the 17 suspects. The crime charge sheet is exceptionally long and included many unnecessary details. To put it in a nutshell, Natasha Sammy Shams Aldine was impregnated twice by someone who is not her lawful husband, and she confessed that she slept with that man on her own accord without coercion. Moreover, she admitted that she fell in love with her neighbor Yasser Sef Aldallah and allowed him to have sex with her. The man in question was already married to another woman when he committed adultery with Natasha Sammy Shams Aldine. After 2 years, the same man committed adultery with Natasha and made her pregnant for the second time. By this time, Mr. Yasser was having 3 wives when he made Natasha pregnant again without marrying her. The charge sheet also mentioned that 4 of Natasha's cousins vowed to perform honor killing on her because she brought disgrace to the name of the family. Those 4 cousins admitted that they entered the Shams Aldine family's house and attempted to murder Natasha, but instead they killed her mother because she tried to stop them from killing her bad daughter. The other 13 suspects have admitted that they conducted an elders' meeting and collectively decided to elect 4 from among them and send them to cleanse the honor of the family, which had been disgraced twice by the daughter of Sammy Shams Aldine. Since in the Islamic Sharia court there are no lawyers or jury, the judge asked the suspects to voice out their protests if what has been mentioned in the charge sheet about them is untrue. None of the 17 suspects has uttered a word. Even Natasha remained silent. But her father Sammy Shams Aldine put up his hand and waited for the judge to give him permission to speak. However, the judge shouted at him and ordered him to put his hand down. The judge told Sammy Shams Aldine that he is not part of the trial, and he has no right to speak on behalf of his daughter because she is already a grown-up woman, and if she wants, she could speak for herself. When the judge prevented the father from raising an objection, the audience clapped their hands in approval of his decision. Then the judge whispered a few words with his 4 assistants, and then turned to the suspects and began to render the judgments of Allah on them. In the name of Allah, the most compassionate and most merciful. Based on the pieces of evidence that had been supplied to this court by the police of Khartoum and on the confessions of those 18 suspects, this court passes the following judgments, which are found in the Sharia laws that are drawn from the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of His Messenger Muhammad, may peace and prayers of Allah be upon him. Regarding the 4 suspects who admitted that they killed the wife of Sammy Shams Aldine, Nadia Alexandrov, and made a serious attempt to murder his daughter, Natasha, with intention to cleanse the honor of the family, which is believed by them to have been disgraced twice by one of their daughters. First, honor killing has no religious basis and has not been supported by any reference to either the Holy Quran or the Blessed Sunnah of the Prophet. Therefore, this court found them guilty of murder and attempted to commit another murder. Secondly, the court found the other 13 suspects guilty of instigation to commit murder. Since honor killing is practiced in the Arab and Muslim societies from time immemorial and Sudan is part of that culture, this court could not pass the death penalty on any of those 17 suspects. Accordingly, the 4 suspects who admitted that they had committed the murder of the wife of Sammy Shams Aldine, this court sentenced each one of them to 5 years imprisonment. Likewise, the court sentences the remaining 13 suspects to 6 months of imprisonment. When the judge passed his sentences on those 17 criminals, the women of those murderers began to shout Zagharit al-Farah, or ululation, or shout of happiness, and their male relatives shouted in unison, "Prison for the brave men." The audience stood on their feet and continued to clap their hands in appreciation of the court's decision. The judge waited for 15 minutes for the audience to end their clapping and shouting. But when it appeared that the audience and the relatives of the 17 condemned murderers went on cheering, the judge used his stick and hammered his table several times before silence was restored to the court. Then the judge opened his mouth again and began to render the judgment of Allah on the suspect Natasha Sami Shams al-Din. In the name of Allah, the most compassionate and most merciful. Natasha Sami Shams al-Din has confessed that she had committed adultery with her neighbor, Yasser Sef al-Dawla, and she got impregnated 2 times by him. According to the Sharia of Allah and His Prophet, adultery can be proved through 3 ways: for witnesses, confession of the adulterers, or pregnancy of the adulterous woman. In the case of this young woman, her adultery had been proved through her personal confession and her pregnancy. Therefore, this Sharia court of Allah has found her guilty of adultery. Allah the Exalted stated in His heavenly book, the gracious Quran, in Surah Al-Nur 24, verse 2, "The woman and the man guilty of adultery, flog each of them with 100 stripes. Let not compassion move you in their case. In a matter prescribed by Allah, if you believe in Allah and the last day, and let a party of the believers witness their punishment." Surah Al-Nur 24, verse 2. So, based on this holy scripture, the court orders Natasha Sami Shams al-Din to be flogged 100 lashes for her first adultery with Yasser Sef al-Dawla. Since the pieces of evidence and confession indicated that this woman repeated the same crime of adultery with the same man who is not her lawful husband, this court doubles the punishment of Natasha Sami Shams al-Din to 200 stripes. However, based on the example of our gracious and compassionate Prophet, this court suspends the punishment of Natasha Sami Shams al-Din until she delivers her illegitimate child. This is because the baby has no hand or guilty of what his adulterous parents did. To justify his decision, the judge supported it by referring to the following religious authority, which is narrating a case of adultery and its punishment. Sulayman ibn Buraida said, "A woman of Gamid, a branch of Azd, came to the Prophet and said, 'Messenger of Allah, purify me.' Whereupon he said, 'Woe be upon you. Go back and beg forgiveness from Allah and turn to Him in repentance.' She said, 'I find that you intend to send me back as you sent back Mu'az ibn Malik.' The Holy Prophet said, 'What has happened to you?' She said that she had become pregnant as a result of fornication. The Holy Prophet said, 'Is it you who has done that?' She said, 'Yes.' The Holy Prophet said to her, 'You will not be punished until you deliver what is there in your womb.' One of the Ansar became responsible for her until she was delivered of the child. He, that Ansari, came to Allah's apostle, may peace be upon him, and said, 'The woman of Gamid has given birth to a child.' The Holy Prophet said, 'In that case, we shall not stone her, and so leave her infant with no to suckle him.' One of the Ansar got up and said, 'Allah's apostle, let the responsibility of his suckling be upon me.' She was then stoned to death. Sahih Muslim, Book 17, Hadith number 4206. The audience once again went into clapping and shouting, but the judge shouted at them and hammered his table with his long stick until he restored order in his courtroom. Then, he stood on his feet and lifted up his both hands and shouted, "This court also finds Yasser Sef al-Dawla guilty of adultery, and since he did it at the first time while he is legally married to his first wife Badriya, and at the second time while he is legally married to his 3 wives, Badriya, Dariya, and Maria, this court orders him to be stoned to death. This judgment of Allah has been issued today against him in his absence, and as soon as he is found and arrested, he must be stoned to death." According to the commandment of Allah in Surah Al-Nur 24, verse 2, the punishment of the adulteress Natasha Sami Shams al-Din and the adulterer Yasser Sef al-Dawla must be carried out in a public place so that a group of Muslim believers can witness it. Chapter 14. An unpleasant encounter in foreign soil. In the meantime, the evil rapist Yasser Sef Al-Dawla and his third wife, Maria Malwal, arrived at the Calgary International Airport on a Monday afternoon. At the arrival hall, 3 Canadian representatives from the immigration office and 1 Sudanese man, as an Arabic interpreter, came to receive the couple. The Sudanese interpreter introduced himself to Yasser and Maria as the president of the Sudanese Association in the city of Calgary. He is known among the Sudanese community in Calgary as Dr. Noor Al-Huda. He also informed them that he is a retired professor of the Arabic language at Calgary University. From the Calgary International Airport, a minibus took the couple to a guest house that created for welcoming and temporarily accommodating newly arrived immigrant refugees. It happened to be that the couple arrived in the guest house at 6 o'clock in the evening. The immigration officials asked them to take a bath and refresh. Then, they took them to a very expensive restaurant and offered them exceptionally delicious food. Yasser and Maria's knowledge of English is zero. The husband can speak only the Arabic language. The wife, besides Arabic, can speak her Denka language. Therefore, the Sudanese interpreter is invited to join them in their dinner. While the group is having their dinner, the Sudanese interpreter kept on talking about himself in Arabic more than trying to know the new arrivals. He told them that he used to be a professor at Khartoum University before he moved to Canada and became a professor of the Arabic language at the University of Calgary. He married to a Sudanese woman and had 2 daughters with her. One of his daughters used to teach in a big private school in Khartoum. She was a teacher of the Arabic language. Unfortunately, the Ministry of Education in Sudan shut down that private school because 1 female student was impregnated by someone out of the marriage bonds. The girl claimed that she was raped by some of her classmates. Anyway, my daughter got married to a nice Sudanese man and had a baby girl. At present, she came to visit me in Calgary. She came for a 6-month visit. While the Sudanese interpreter is deeply engrossed in talking about himself and singing many praises about his daughter, Maria suddenly interrupted him and asked him to tell her the name of his beloved daughter and the name of her nice husband. My daughter's name is Daria, and her husband is called Yasser. When the interpreter mentioned the names of his daughter and her husband, Maria felt as if she suddenly discovered a venomous viper under her chair. Her reaction drew the attention of all except her husband. At that moment, Yasser is busy staring at the young white teenage girls who are dressed up in a way that he thought they were half naked. He missed the unpleasant discovery that his wife had already made. "Is there anything bad that happened to Mrs. Sef Al-Dawla?" asked one of the welcoming officials. Before answering her question, the interpreter translated it into Arabic and redirected it to Maria. He himself wants to know why Maria jumped off her chair as if someone had pinched her thigh from underneath her seat. Maria hid her unpleasant discovery and made some silly excuses for her unexplainable action. She said she had got a sudden painful cramp in one of her thighs. The interpreter swallowed her lie and interpreted it in English to the Canadian woman who asked him. After dinner, the couple was taken back to the guest house and accommodated in a beautiful room. The immigration officials promised that they would try to find as soon as possible an apartment for Mr. and Mrs. Sef Al-Dawla. Meanwhile, they told them that they have to stay in the guest house and whatever food they would order from the cafeteria, it would be covered by the immigration office. Before he said goodbye to them, the Sudanese interpreter gave the couple his cell phone number and promised to come one day and invite them for dinner in his house and meet his beloved daughter Daria and see her cute new baby girl, Miriam. As soon as Maria was left alone with her husband, she broke the disturbing news to him. On hearing the incredible news, Yasser felt as if someone cast on him a feminine spell. He cursed himself when he came to know that his imprisoned wife, Daria, was released from prison, and at present, she is living in the same country and the same city he came to live in. When he overcame the shock, he told his wife that they should move to another city as soon as possible. Maria immediately welcomed the idea of her husband. In fact, she is more scared to face her dangerous girlfriend than her husband was. She knew that Daria would turn her life into hell when she would come to know that she had stolen her husband and brought him all the way from Sudan to Canada. That day, the frightened couple spent many hours discussing their serious problem. They are worried that Daria's father might inform his daughter that he had welcomed new Sudanese arrivals by the name of Yasser Sef Al-Dawla and Maria Malal. Daria will immediately connect the dots and understand that the couple in question is her lawful husband Yasser Sef Al-Dawla and her friend Maria Malal. If Daria comes to know about them, she will come to the guest house right away, attack Maria, and take by force her stolen husband. Yasser and Maria would have escaped out of the city on the same day of their arrival if they had the means to do so. The immigration representatives have not given them any money yet. Nonetheless, before they had left, the representatives promised to come in the morning and take them to their office and pay their first monthly check. They were told that, as resettled landed immigrant refugees, they would be financially supported by the government of Alberta for a period of 1 year, and after that, they are expected to start working and meeting their needs. For 1 whole year, the immigration office would pay their rents, send them a monthly check for their food, clothes, and recreation, pay their phone and light bills, provide them with legal aid, and, in case of illness, provide 100% coverage of their medical prescriptions. After a long discussion and reasoning, the couple decided to inform the immigration representatives that they would like to move to Edmonton City. As an excuse, they decided to tell them that Maria has some of her cousin sisters who are living in that city. Therefore, the extremely frightened couple made up their minds to move to Edmonton as soon as possible and avoid meeting Daria nor Al-Huda. But things did not go the way the frightened couple expected them to happen. On the next day morning, and before the immigration representatives arrived, Dr. Noor Al-Huda and his hot-tempered daughter came to the guest house. Daria did not come over there to welcome the newly arrived couple, but to take revenge on her best girlfriend who had taken advantage of her incarceration and stolen her handsome husband. That morning, when the two former girlfriends met, they engaged in fierce fighting as if they were two wild cats fighting over a piece of meat. Chapter 15. The fight of two rival wives over one husband. The fight between the two rival wives began verbally, and when every filthy word in the book was used, the quarrel turned into a deadly physical battle. The once-upon-a-time best friends became bitter enemies, just like a Muslim woman and a Jewish woman fighting over their religious differences. They slapped, scratched, kicked, bitten, and pulled out each other's hair. Though their clothes are torn into pieces and their naked bodies exposed, still they did not stop beating each other. Though their red underwear and black underwear have become visible, still they didn't care. Though their faces and bodies are covered by sweat and blood, still they did not cease from hammering one another. All new arrivals in the guest house stood by and watched in fear and trembling the fierce fighting between the two Sudanese women. No one knew the cause of that deadly fight except Yasser Sef Al-Dawla and Dr. Noor Al-Huda. If the representatives of the immigration office did not show up at the right time, that deadly fight would have ended up in one of the two rival wives has murdered the other wife. The representatives are shocked when they walked inside the guest house and saw the huge gathering of immigrants and workers, and in the center the two Sudanese women fighting hands and teeth. When they saw Mrs. Sef Al-Dawla is knocked down and on top of her body another Sudanese woman, their shock became terror. One of them overcame the shock, turned her face toward the interpreter, and demanded an explanation. What is the hell going on between those two angry women? Ma'am, one of the two women accused the other of stealing her husband. Who accused who? Mrs. Sef Al-Dawla just arrived yesterday in Canada. The other woman accused her of stealing her husband. Is the husband a chair or money to be stolen by someone? I am serious in my words, ma'am. This is nonsense. It does not make any sense to me. Someone should call the police and let the cops deal with those crazy women. Before the cops arrived, the representatives of the immigration office, along with the interpreter Dr. Noor Al-Huda, somehow managed to separate the two furious women and kept each one locked up in one room. When the police arrived, Maria and Daria were arrested, handcuffed, and taken into custody. As soon as the police left, the immigration representatives began to question Yasser Sef Al-Dawla about the allegation of being stolen by one of the two women. Do you know that woman who had attacked your wife? Asked the same woman who called the cops. Whom did you marry first among the two women? Dr. Noor Al-Huda purposely changed the question and translated it in a way to favor his daughter. Until this stage, the immigration representatives knew nothing about the relationship between their interpreter and the woman who assaulted Mrs. Saif al-Dawla and accused her of stealing her husband. "I married first Daria and then I married Maria," said Yasser. "Ma'am, he said he knows the woman and she is his first wife." "What did he say?" shouted the same woman. "Ma'am, what I have understood from this case is that Mr. Yasser Saif al-Dawla married both women. His first wife is called Daria. She is the one who came today and accused Maria of stealing her husband." "I can't get it. Who is that woman and from where did she come?" "She is a Sudanese woman. She came to Canada on a visiting visa. Somehow, she came to know that her husband arrived in Calgary with another woman. So, she came to the guest house and attacked Maria. But Maria is the real wife of Mr. Saif al-Dawla." "Ma'am, both women are his lawful wives." "Wait a minute," shouted another immigration representative. "This is not the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia or Afghanistan. He can't have two wives in Canada." Dr. Noor al-Huda turned his face to Yasser and said to him seriously, "In Canada, you can't have Daria and Maria as your two lawful wives at the same time. You have to choose one of the two. I don't want any one of them." "Ma'am, Mr. Yasser Saif al-Dawla has said he wants to have both wives. In no uncertain terms, he is going to choose one and leave the other. He loves them equally and for that reason, he wants them both. He has also said his Holy Quran commands him to treat them equally. That is none of our business. Let him solve his dispute between his women by himself. We are not marriage counselors." As for the immigration authority, Maria is the only wife he has. If he wants the other woman, let him divorce Maria first. It is illegal for him to have two wives in Canada. He would go to jail if he were caught having two wives at the same time. "We don't allow Sharia in Canada," shouted another immigration representative who is voicing his opinion on this serious issue for the first time. But Yasser married the two women in Sudan. Sudan is a Muslim country, and Islam allows the Muslim man to marry up to 4 wives at the same time, said the interpreter, challenging the immigration representative who brought the issue of the Sharia law versus the Canadian law. "We don't care what the people do in Sudan. As long as they live in Canada, they have to abide by Canadian law." Dr. Noor al-Huda found himself speechless when the immigration representative boldly challenged him and in one stroke refuted his argument that Yasser's 2 marriages are lawful because they took place in a country that follows Sharia law. Even so, the dispute between the 2 wives over their lawful husband did not end with the immigration office. It became a police case and involved the entire Sudanese community in Calgary. In fact, due to the civil war in the south of Sudan, the Sudanese community in Calgary is divided into 2 communities. The Northern Arab Sudanese Association, headed by Dr. Noor al-Huda himself, and the Southern Sudanese Association, headed by Mr. William Deng. As soon as Mr. Deng came to know about the dispute between the 2 rival wives who have one husband, he stepped in and investigated the matter. He came to know that one of the 2 women is a Sudanese African Christian and the second is a Sudanese Arab Muslim. Furthermore, his investigation revealed that the Muslim wife is the daughter of the former professor Noor al-Huda. When this information reached the immigration office, the Arabic translator Dr. Noor al-Huda was disqualified from being the interpreter in that serious dispute. The reason that has been given for his disqualification is the fear of having a conflict of interests. Maria and Daria were released from the lockup after 24 hours. The police made Daria sign an agreement that she would never come 100 meters near the place where Maria and her husband are staying. She is also warned that if she broke that agreement, she would be arrested and tried, and most likely she would be deported to Sudan. Notwithstanding, the dispute between those 2 rival girlfriends did not end there. It became an extremely serious social issue between both communities. The matter led to some fights between some Sudanese women. Someone wrote an anonymous letter to the immigration office and disclosed the serious quarrels between the 2 communities that resulted due to the dispute between the Christian wife and the Muslim wife of Mr. Yasser Saif al-Dawla. The letter stated that under pressure from the Sudanese Muslim Arab community, Mr. Yasser Saif al-Dawla kicked out his Christian wife Maria and brought in his Muslim wife Daria. When the immigration office verified the veracity of the information that reached them through that anonymous letter, they decided to deal with the case in a wise way. They understood that such a marital dispute would not be solved through the law. They asked each community to elect 5 representatives and send them for a meeting with the immigration office. Yasser and his 2 rival wives were invited to attend that meeting too. After hot debate and name-calling and finger-pointing between the representatives of both communities and the 2 rival wives, Yasser made up his mind and decided to leave both women and look for another girl of his age. He frankly confessed that he married both women for material gains, and when that condition ceased to exist, he is not interested in either. He then told the assembled groups that Maria is 10 years older than him and Daria as old as his mother. Albeit he admitted that he impregnated both women and he would be responsible for the 2 children that he fathered from them. Yasser's decision is welcomed by both communities as fair and tackled the serious issue. Though the representatives of the immigration office did not like it, they understood they have no right to force someone to stay with a woman that he did not like to live with anymore.